I'm delighted to say, joining me for the whole show, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Where do we start? I'm going to start briefly on this tanker collision, just because it's so much dominating broadcast news, and again, a lot of it is because, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. It's a big picture of, you know, fire and smoke and destruction. But fires are still burning on an oil tanker carrying jet fuel for American defence fighters, and a cargo ship carrying highly toxic chemicals that collided in the North Sea on Monday morning. The news actually broke during my show yesterday, and we were thinking, well, you know, is this a big story? Turns out this is really unusual, and these are really, really big tankers, both of which are carrying chemicals and you know, oil that we don't necessarily want to have, or jet fuel that we want to have in the North Sea. But it does seem extraordinary that two vessels as large as this should collide. One, by the way, anchored and completely stationary, and as you can see from some of the footage of the radar, you know, this one of the ships just literally just basically tearing at great speed towards the oil tanker. One person is missing, the presumed dead. The search has been called off. Everyone else rescued, thank goodness. Worries about an ecological disaster, which no doubt will be massively overplayed by the BBC, Sky and ITV for the usual political reasons. But there is still an argument that, you know, that foul play has not been ruled out, because it's such a strange accident to have happened.
No, whenever something like this happens, it always takes a while for the dust to settle. They're still putting out the fires, incidentally, so we're really at the beginning of this. But there's always that question, was this simple old human error? Was there an element of foul play here? Did the technology, did the radar fail, or is it a mix of all of these different things?
I mean, they were told it was quite foggy at the time, so if someone was on lookout, but you've got radar, but yeah.
It's just, it's one of those things that people expect almost couldn't happen in this day and age, I suppose. But as we saw maybe with that kind of spate of airplane crashes in the US recently, these things do happen from time to time, and there will be a long kind of process to work out, you know, if any lessons at all can be learned from it.
You would think there was somebody, in the same way air traffic controllers, obviously bigger concern, because, you know, planes are flying to each other, you know, come down over an urban area and kill people, as has happened. But you'd think that there would be somebody who, in the Coast Guard, would be looking, going, hold on a minute, that's a very big ship. And that very big ship is heading right towards that other very big ship that isn't moving. It's getting closer and closer. It doesn't appear to be veering off course. Maybe we'll send a message to them to say, hey, you know, you're heading straight towards it, you know, were there we're told it was foggy and misty, but even so, you'd think the radar, but again, it may well be that somebody, you know, people weren't on deck, the watch wasn't on deck. Again, we don't work in this industry, but certainly everyone seems to think this is a rather strange event to have happened. Interesting that it is actually, what has been impacted is a cargo ship carrying, or an oil tanker carrying jet fuel for the US Navy. Seems, I suppose, at this time, questionable. I'm sure Elon Musk will blame it on Ukraine, like he blamed that a cyber attack on X, despite no evidence whatsoever.
No, I'm sure he and many others will be connecting dots that probably shouldn't be connected, as they tend to do. But you're right. I mean, the fact that this was carrying that kind of fuel for the US Navy adds an extra dimension to it. More questions asked about. There's therefore more incentive, more motive potentially for this to be something that was intentional rather than just accidental. But as you say, you come back to that point of when you've got these cargo ships, these containers which are carrying potentially very polluting, dangerous chemicals and substances, the fact that there aren't more kind of layers of safeguards and technology.
You think.
It's the sort of thing you just naturally
never dismiss human failure, cock-up theory. I mean, you know, these are nearly always the reasons, sadly, why these things happen. Anyway, we'll keep you up to date on any developments there. Let's talk about something which, again, you could say, oh, these are accidents that happen, and these things are going to happen, and these people will slip through into the country, and you know, and we do our best. This is a deliberate policy failure by this and all previous governments, and by our courts, etc. This man, Palestinian Abu Wadi, who left Gaza. Again, I thought we're told that Gaza was a prison. So I don't understand how this guy got out of Gaza, for the start. But he arrived, we believe, in the country last Thursday. He was identified by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, not by authorities, not by the people whose job it is, whose wages we pay to identify who the hell are these people. He didn't sneak in under darkness. He was rescued by a Royal Navy ship on a Channel dinghy. Posted about it on Facebook. Nice to know someone's still using Facebook. Who knew? I mean, who knew? And very open. I mean, and on the same Facebook page where he's happily posted pictures of himself with an assault rifle and calling for, death to all Jews, let's kill all Jews, and openly supporting Hamas and Al-Aqsa and other people, organisations involved in the 7th of October massacre. An all-round bad person who we don't want. I don't want him in Gaza. I definitely don't want him in the UK. He arrives in this country and basically seeking asylum here. The authorities don't identify him until the campaign against anti-Semitism do, and he's on the front page of the Mail on Sunday. And then on Sunday night, he's arrested. Having been walking freely around our country since presumably Friday, they obviously kept overnight, often when they're being processed. No one bothered to obviously check who he was and check his background, do the most cursory check of his social media. And now we're told he has now been arrested on Sunday night and that he is being charged with illegally entering the country. Oh, well done, authorities. Oh, well done. But realistically, as the Mail points out today, it's very unlikely he will actually be able to be returned to Gaza or anywhere else, because Home Office guidelines say they cannot return anyone to Gaza because it risks exposing them to, quote, serious harm, because conditions there are, quote, amount to torture or inhumane or degrading treatment under, guess what, the European Convention on Human Rights. So this guy, complete wrong-un, sneaks into this country, didn't even sneak, openly, blatantly, and now we're going to be stuck with him. I mean, this cannot continue.
I think it also says something about how little we've come to expect from our officials, from Border Force, that someone can openly broadcast the fact that they're an anti-Semitic, terror-supporting scumbag, and openly broadcast that they are crossing the Channel into England, and that when they managed to catch up with him within the space of a couple of days, we almost give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
I mean,
I come, ready or not.
That they managed to pull this one off. I mean, it's outrageous that, as the Mail is pointing out, it's very likely that they won't be able to deport him because of this difficulty. They've had it with Afghanistan, they've had it with other countries, of not being able to send people back when they're coming from war zones or when they're coming from places controlled by terror groups or what have you. In the case of Gaza, it's obviously both. It's one of those things where you're also worried about the people who weren't broadcasting their intentions so clearly. We did have an anti-Semitic, Hamas-inspired terror attack shortly after October the 7th in Hartley-Brewer. It was a Moroccan asylum seeker who had been floating around Europe for years, ended up in Britain around 2020, was so excited by October the 7th that he stabbed his housemate and a 70-year-old gentleman in the street. There are going to be more cases like this. You don't have to be some fire-breathing bigot to recognise it. If you don't have a border whatsoever on the south coast, people will exploit that to do harm
and we
to
know
your
there's
citizens.
already, a dozen plus people who are on the MI5 watch list. Those just the ones they know about. But they didn't know about this guy until the campaign against anti-Semitism pointed it out.
And if they can find, this is the other thing.
This is my thing, yeah, exactly.
It's one thing to say, like, why aren't the state on top of this? But also the fact that it apparently isn't even that hard to be on top of some of these cases. Like, anyone who knows their way around various social media accounts and knows what to look for can find this information. And the fact that the state, the people who are charged with keeping us safe, were not privy to this person.
Didn't think it was worth looking for. I mean, I think my number one thing would be, every time you guys get off, photograph, fingerprint, look up, give us, what's your name? I mean, again, this guy's got two different names. They all have two different names. How useful, how convenient. It defies belief to me that we'll just wait. We're just going to wait for the next attack.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. We're just going to wait for the next attack. And then when we have the attack, we're going to light some candles and we're going to pray. We're going to sing "Don't Look Back in Anger," talk about community cohesion, and then we all move on to the next one. And that's what we do now, and that's what France does, and what Germany does, and Austria does, and Sweden does, and every other insane country that opened their doors to these people. And it just defies belief that people are going to put up with this madness anymore. And I really had to edit myself with the word madness there.
And you would think we'd have learned this by now. I mean, ISIS were exploiting the migrant crisis in 2015 to go back and forth between Syria
and we're open about it, blatant about it.
Absolutely, and because of the fact that, again, because of this absurd situation that we had allowed to take place, people could show up with no documentation, you have no idea who they were whatsoever, could easily melt into the crowd, as it were, and disappear either into the black market or into terror cells in Belgium or France or elsewhere. How much evidence do we need to recognise that this is a clear route for importing terror?
Absolutely. I'd really like to hear from you on this. What do we do about this? I mean, I don't even think leaving the European Convention on Human Rights is going to be enough on this one, because we know that our insane tribunal judges are just going to overrule and just say, oh, well, I still think, my interpretation of the human rights law here. We're going to have a root and branch change. And it's something I know Lionel Shriver was talking about this on your Spike podcast on Friday, which is a must listen, I have to say. And she was saying, I think, this is what we actually have to abandon kind of the whole asylum system at this point. At some point, we're just like, this is not something that is even viable anymore. I think it was her saying it anyway. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call. And this is very much linked in this story. And this is there's some stats that have only been obtained through Freedom of Information requests made repeatedly by the Centre for Migration Control, because the government does not put out this information, and it's been very difficult to get hold of it. Even I think Denmark was the first European country to actually do it, to actually look at who is committing crimes in this country? And again, people, can everyone please stop being racist and xenophobic? No, and bigoted. No, facts are none of those things. Facts are facts. And the facts are absolutely astonishing. And it would appear from this data, from the Ministry of Justice, not me saying it, Ministry of Justice official figures, shows that foreigners may well be responsible for up to a quarter of all sex crimes in this country, some of the most serious crimes in this country. 15% of sexual offences, including rape, were accounted for by foreign nationals in the last few years. A further 8% of convictions were recorded as unknown nationalities. Well, you can guess if someone's British or not, can't you? There's giveaways. So we're going to have to assume realistically that those are also foreigners. So even though just 9% of the population is foreign born, is a foreign nationality, we are looking at 23% of all offenders convicted of sex crimes are foreigners. That tells you something. And crucially, two nationalities in particular, Afghans and Eritreans, who are very large percentages of Channel migrants, by the way, are some of the worst, most profligate offenders, more than 20 times more likely to have a sexual offence conviction than a British citizen. I mean, as it is, 71% overall foreign nationals are 71% more likely than Britons to be responsible for sex crime convictions. Now, either Britons are really good at getting away with sexual assault and rape, or something is going on. And this tallies with what an awful lot of young women, I know obviously a lot of teenage girls, having a teenage daughter myself, and young women in their 20s are telling me who do get sexually harassed on the streets, that certainly in London it is invariably someone with a foreign accent who is harassing them. And the concerns about this are, and very, very difficult to get away from. Not, hey, darling, you're looking good. Nothing. We're talking about stuff way more, invasive than that. I mean, we need to know these things, and let's face some facts. Men coming from countries where they have a very different attitude, different culture, certainly different attitude to women and what women should wear and how women should behave and women's equality, are going to treat women differently. And you only have to travel in the Middle East to see that. I've been to Egypt many, many times scuba diving, and it is blatant and obvious, and anyone who's pretending it isn't true is frankly just keeping their eyes closed.
And it's one of those things where if you allow for essentially uncontrolled movement across borders, you're going to create a situation in which you incentivise or make it easier for people who have often criminal past, criminal intentions, criminal proclivities to pass through. I mean, people who are likely to enter a nation illegally, there will be a proportion of them who are doing so for refugee purposes, although one might ask why they couldn't claim asylum in France rather than here. Nevertheless, there will also be a large proportion of them who are just criminals, who do a lot of other illegal things.
I know, we're all shocked by that.
And we've seen in some of those crazy asylum cases, people who turned out they weren't fleeing war or persecution, they were fleeing sexual assault crimes, murder crimes, all sorts of other convictions in other countries. Yeah. And that's why they've ended up in this over here. So you don't have... this is a kind of common sense point, that if you're effectively incentivising some of the criminal elements to be able to enter your country quite easily and to stick around, then this might happen. It's not to say that everyone who comes from a particular nation is like that. It's not to say that there are these issues. We're almost selecting for the wrong uns in the way in which we deal with this problem, and then people turn around and are surprised.
And then the bleeding heart liberals treat them as victims, again, by default. It's just extraordinary. I want to hear from you on this. I want to hear from you, obviously, on getting stuck with this Palestinian migrant. We're going to be stuck with him, and he won't be the only one. There'll be others, again, who somehow managed to get out of the prison that is Gaza. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. What do we do about this? What is your reaction? What do we do? What do we do about this? Because I don't think not doing something is an option anymore. And I think the Uni Party, the Labour and the Tories, who think that you can not do something about it, or you can talk about doing it, or go through the motions of doing it, which is what the Conservatives did for the last few years. Good luck with that. I don't think the British public are going to put up with it much longer. I think this stuff is out of the bag now. People are aware of it, people can see it, and people are not willing to put up with it anymore. And I'll tell you particularly one, women. We're done. We're done with this. This is impacting us more than anyone else, and we're not happy about it.